So we're talking today with Andrew Quin, who is the chief winemaker for Hentley Farm wines in the Barossa Valley. And Hentley Farm is again this year one of the Real Review's top wineries of 2022. Congratulations, Andrew, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Huon. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now, we had one of your wines last night in the masterclass. It was the Beast, and I think it was the 2018, a cracking wine. Very, very good vintage, it seems to me, 2018.
Yeah, 18 was one of those. I really love the vintages in the Barossa when we tend to get cooler conditions sort of late in the harvest period, particularly out here in the Western Ridge. If it is warm, we tend to see quite a fast late ripening curve, which can be hard to manage in terms of keeping alcohols down and that sort of brightness and vibrancy of flavour that we normally look for. So I love the vintages like 2018 where we get that cool weather late in the season and we tend to be able to take our time picking and end up with lots of blending options on the bench. So yeah, it was up there with some of the best in the 14 years that I've been making the wines here.
Yeah, well, Hentley Farm is, as you mentioned, in the Western Ridge of the Barossa, out Seppeltsfield, Greenock way. What is it about that part of the Barossa that's special and different?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think soil is certainly a big part of it. So we have these beautiful red clay loam soils with, I guess, predominantly limestone underneath, but then variations of that, bluestone as well. But I think it's that red clay loam topsoil that really drives the quality and particularly the quality of tannin in Shiraz out this way. But it's also a pretty unique little climate out here. We have, especially where we are at Hentley Farm, almost what appears to be this sort of big amphitheatre out on the Western Ridge, where the actual ridge on the western side creates the highest point. But then we have the Greenock Creek that runs through the middle, then slopes on the eastern, northern and southern side. So we end up with this really cool little amphitheatre that creates lots of diversity in sites and soils and therefore wine types and styles. So we're very lucky to work with the site that we have.
Yeah. Are you a Barossa boy born and raised?
No, quite the opposite here. And I grew up in the Bayside suburbs of Melbourne. So my wife and I moved to the Barossa in 2008 when I did a short vintage night shift winemaking role at Yalumba and walked into the Hentley Farm gig just after that. And we've been here ever since.
So you were right there on the ground floor when Hentley Farm opened up, weren't you? You were Keith and
the
owner.
brand had been going for a little while, but the actual cellar door opened in 2008, not long after I'd started. So I think the first wines were produced in 2002, 2003, and they started to get more serious in the years that followed. So the brand had been around for a few years, but I was the first full-time winemaker that was employed, and the cellar door opened after that, and obviously the rest is history.
Yeah, one of the things I like about the Hentley Farm Reds is they're unashamedly big, full-bodied, concentrated wines, but they have freshness. They're obviously made from very ripe grapes. They're rich, but they have freshness and life to them, which you don't always find those two things together, do you?
No, you don't. And I think you've highlighted probably the thing I've been trying to achieve in our wines over the whole journey. Yeah. We're on the Western Ridge of the Barossa. It is a warm place. The soils that we grow our vines on certainly lend themselves to being big, rich wines. But I've always wanted to produce wines that still sort of speak of this place, therefore have some power and richness and density. But I think there should always be some freshness and vibrancy in the wines. So we use a whole lot of techniques. Harvest is certainly one of them, where we'll pick quite a few blocks of Shiraz, what would be considered probably a little bit underripe, and treat them quite gently, through to picking the bigger, riper styles. So we've got those blending options on the bench. That's a big part of it. I think acidity is really important. And I think sometimes those sort of old school Barossa styles that lacked that natural acidity and freshness and ageability was driven through over ripeness and a lack of acid. And so there's all those sorts of things we're trying to use in our winemaking to make sure that we achieve what you've just described. Richness, power, but still hopefully there's that freshness and vibrancy in the wines. Even the Beast, the Beast is probably the wine that we produce that is most closely aligned to that old school Barossa style, but we still want to see that brightness and vibrancy of fruit shining through.
And what about the Clos Otto? That's a special wine, isn't it? That's a single vineyard wine from a special bit of vineyard that Keith Henschke didn't plant himself. I think he bought that as an existing vineyard from the original owner.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, in terms of the Hentley Farm story, it is very much a site selection story. So back in the late 90s, Keith drove around the Barossa and spoke to lots of winemakers trying to work out what he thought would be the best sub-region in the Barossa Valley. And he ended up landing on sort of the northwestern region and the soils that sort of based around the Granite Creek. And so he drove around looking for a site and was fortunate enough to stumble across what is now the Hentley Farm estate. And at that point in time, a little German guy, Otto Kasper, had already planted out the property next door to the one that Keith eventually ended up purchasing. So Keith and Otto were neighbours for quite a long time and became quite good friends. And then in 2004, Otto decided to head back to Germany, and Keith ended up pretty quickly, I think, jumping on purchasing Otto's vineyard. And so we sort of think of it as a single vineyard within our single vineyard. If you have a chance to come to our Salador and restaurant, you drive down a little track, and on the right-hand side of that track is what is the Beast block and planted by Keith, and on the left-hand side of that track is the Clos Otto vineyard planted out by Otto. So side by side, it's still obviously all a single vineyard for most purposes, but we sort of look at that Otto planting as a single vineyard within a single vineyard.
Yeah, and I believe Otto Kasper himself was he was quite an old man when he planted that vineyard. Then he went away, and then he came back as an even older man. And he was quite emotional.
Yeah, which was lovely. I was away at the time, so I missed him when he came back, which I was disappointed in. But yeah, he made a surprise visit to the Salador, I think back in 2013, 2014, which was lovely to see. And he was really pleased to see that we're producing these great wines off the fruit that he planted, and obviously that they're sitting at the premium end of our range. We do a Cabernet off his planting as well, called Von Casper, that has been a really consistent wine for us over the journey. So, yeah, he did some great work, and obviously the dirt's good, but he did great work developing that vineyard as well.
Yeah, and no doubt he was chuffed to see his own name on the label of an expensive wine as well.
He was very happy. I think it brought some tears to his eyes, so that was nice.
So are there any exciting things coming up at Hentley Farm? Have you got anything in the pipeline that's going to surprise us?
We do have a few things. We have a premium wine that we've been working on for a while called E-Block, which is from the highest block that we have here at Seppeltsfield up on what we call Mount Rufus. So E-Block Shiraz, which has sort of had a little bit of a light release, but it will come out in the market more significantly as time goes by. So that's a new super premium Shiraz. So that's pretty exciting. The new estate down in Mount Crawford's obviously been a lot of fun for us. We had our first production of Garganega that we produced last year and was really successful, and we have a second vintage of that, albeit quite a small production, coming along. We're just bottling our whites off the vintage, so Riesling's looking really strong. So we're really excited about how that could be received, and it's 2 years in a row of really strong quality in Riesling, and particularly really bright natural acidity, which is not something we always see in Eden Valley, so that's pretty exciting.
Great to talk to you, Andrew Quin, Chief Winemaker, Hentley Farm Wines, Barossa Valley, one of our top wineries of the year for Australia 2022. Well done, and we look forward to seeing you at our exhibitions for the top wineries this year. Cheers, Andrew.
Thanks, Huon. Thanks for having us, and thanks for tasting the wines. Really appreciate it.